A few use cases with the data archive and backup solution. So this is the administration interface, and we'll take a look at the primary server settings. This is the source storage device, which can be any vendor, including just generic SMB, but we have native integrations with Windows and NetApp that allows for seamless stubbing or HTML stubbing. We'll go through both. So here we have a primary storage device added. There's a list of SMB shares. So we'll take a look here. And we see we've got a share called HTML stubs. We've got a test folder and a backup folder. So these are the ones we're going to take a look at. Now, these have been configured with various policies. And in the case of the backup share, it is sending data to a target that will store backup data. And it's using a tiering policy called backup. We'll take a look at that in a second. We have another target for archival purposes, and this is using test. And here we're using an HTML stubbing policy, and we'll go through that in just a second. So, stub settings. So take a look at the backup configuration. So copy the primary files on the primary storage to the secondary storage and do not stub. So this basically will back up all the data, and each time it runs, it will skip data that's been backed up previously, much like a full and incremental. There's a few other options in here just to show what we've selected. Copy the files to the primary storage and do not stub. So we're doing this for SMB and NFS. There's various delete options which don't make sense in a backup use case, so we've left those as default. Now we'll go to the other option for stubbing. Now we're now looking at an archive use case. That was the backup use case configuration. Now we're going to look at stubbing. For devices that do not support a transparent archive API, we can use HTML stubs, or we can use a URL shortcut. We'll go through the HTML stub option, so you can see it's selected here. Stub files on primary storage using an HTML shortcut, so SMB and NFS. And we'll leave all the other options. These are more advanced options for deleting data from the archive after a certain retention, many other advanced settings, but we'll go through that at a later time. And we're going to use this URL, which allows for single-click retrieval for archive data. We'll demonstrate what that looks like. And just a few more settings to take a look at here. So here's the backup policy. So we want to back up data no matter what size it is. So we set this to 0 and maximum file size is unlimited. There's a checkbox, run in backup mode. It's pretty straightforward to enable that. It disables all the criteria for matching data, modified date, accessed, created. That's typically used for an archive use case. And so we've already configured this for backup, and that's about it. So let's take a look at the HTML option. Here, we've decided that we're going to modify based on modification date. If it's 1 day or older, you would never do this in production, but we're going to use this to transform files of any size to the archive if their modification date is older than 1 day. You can see there's various combinations of modified, accessed, or created that we could use. And then we're going to go take a look at the default policy because it's been set up for transparent. Take a look here. Again, we've decided in this case, we're going to set a minimum file size of 64K, and we're going to use modified greater than 24 months for modified. If it's accessed, same thing. Created, we're not going to worry about creation dates for archive policies. So those are the 3 different use cases we're going to walk through. And this is configured under secondary storage. Secondary storage is your archive target. So what options exist? Well, we have the options for a file share. So you can have a remote file share. We can use Microsoft Azure, Amazon, or an S3 connector, things like Wasabi as an example. We can also use any combination of these and create various targets. So they're called storage groups. We have 2 I've got a backup target and a test. We could create several different storage targets. In fact, there's advanced options where you can spray data across multiple destinations. So you could put data into Amazon and Azure and require archived data to land successfully in both before it's considered archived. Many advanced options are possible. So let's take a look at the user experience, the workflow. So we'll come down here to this SMB share. So here we have some data. There's a 22 megabyte file. There's an administrator snap-in, very useful for administrators. That's what we're going to use to kind of force data into the archive without waiting for the modification date. So let's go ahead and right-click. And what you see, we have an option to tier that file. That's going to archive it. We can bring it back and then auto re-tier. This means I could bring it back, and if the criteria matches, it'll then automatically re-archive it versus just bring it back and then have to wait again for that file to match. So let's go ahead and just say tier file. It says, do you want to do this? Say yes, successfully submitted this. So that's it. So now let's go take a look and see what's happening. So here's a job that's begun. It's got one file submitted. That's the one we just submitted manually. And it's going to this destination. And it takes a few seconds before the job gets picked up. But we'll just hang out here and we will see that that file, it just got turned into a 4K HTML stub. So it's now been archived. So we'll go back to my archive job, refresh, stats all update, completed successfully. So that was pretty quick and we're done. Now we'll take a look at the HTML end user experience. Now I want to get that file back. So what does that look like? So we'll come back over here. And if I double click this, I go to a web page and it will outline, here's the file. This is the date that it was tiered. These are the date stamps. And I can say, you know what? Put that file back exactly where you found it. That's the most common option. Or we could actually take a bunch of data and stick it in a download site, and I can just download it to my computer and not put it back in its original location. So I'm going to just bring it back. Now, as an end user, I need to see how my request is processing. And you can see here, it's pretty straightforward. It's executing and complete. Now, that was fast. So let's go back here and look at that. My file's back. So that's HTML stub end user experience. Not a lot of training required. Anybody can double click on a file. The benefit here is that the file is visible. There's a breadcrumb in the file system indicating that that file is still available, but it does have an HTML extension, but the file name is the same. Now let's take a look at the transparent integration. So we're going to go over to the test folder. I have different data here. So let's do this. Let's take all these files and let's submit those. Are you sure? 4 files. Yes. Done. Again, I'm the administrator, so I will go back to the admin interface and I see there's another request. Should be for 4 files. So give that a chance. Now, all of these jobs can be controlled. Maybe I don't want this happening in the middle of the business day. I could push this off to off hours. All kinds of options there to ensure that you don't have a flood of data being archived. You could queue this up at night, fully controllable. So as we go here, and how do we know the data is archived? Well, it's really easy. You can see the little offline attribute, right? That little X, the icon changed, and that's the offline attribute. So natively integrated into Microsoft's user experience, it's very easy as an end user to understand that file's not there anymore. But it still says 22 megabyte per file. So I don't think I can add it here. Let's see if there's an on disk. size on disk, I think it's called. Take a quick look in the advanced attributes and see if that's a possible way to show it side by side. No, doesn't look like it. So what we'll do is I will properties. You'll see here 64K on disk, but it was 22. So this means it's natively integrated into the Microsoft experience. All the APIs fully support the ability to show on disk versus actual real file size. So this is the HSM architecture of Microsoft. This works with not just Windows OSs, but with other storage devices that support this interface. So PowerStore, NetApp, and others support that. Now, I did read that file, and you'll notice that the icon changed behind the scenes. And that means the file is now rehydrated. So if I right-click Properties again and choose Properties, you'll see 21 megabyte, 21 megabyte. It's been automatically on demand, no training, no HTML stub, no web page. It just hydrates. So what happens if I click on a file that's archived? What's going to happen? So in this case, wasn't instantaneous. So now it's back, and there we go. File's back. In most cases, applications um, will allow this to operate, and it might be a slight pause before that file opens, but there's my file back. So 2 of the 4 have been hydrated. If I have retiering turned on, then we can place that back in uh, the archive automatically. So that's it from a user experience standpoint. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Um, Now let's take a look at bulk recall and bulk uh, backup restore. So this is using the what the user would experience, but we can also go to the recovery portal. So let's take a look at a folder uh, or Explorer view. This is a great view of the environment. So I'm administrator. I'm going to come in here. I've got some stubs. I got some archive data, and I have a backup there. So let's take all the data here, bunch of data, and I've selected this folder. I come down here. Now, versions, that's related to objects. Restore the subfolder. So I maybe only want the top folder, but I want all the subfolders. Restore content to primary storage. That's typically what you want to do. I'm not going to auto tier it because we're not archiving in this situation. And we're going to go ahead and submit that request. And again, I get this interface for monitoring this right from this tool. I don't need to go back to the administrator interface, but we can take a look and we should see the recall. Look up here. So there's the recall job, but we'll monitor this from the recovery portal. These jobs get picked up again, could be up to 30 seconds to a minute. You can see here recursive is turned on. So it's now in the execution stage. And that's it, we're done. It's brought that data back. Now I didn't actually delete it in this case, which I could have done. So let's go to my, so let's look at another scenario where I want to search for data to restore. So I'm going to say this, it's going to ask me which share I want. And then folders, these are all the folders that have been backed up. So we'll say that and say, give me all the folders. And so I can now search across options for restore. So obviously the browsing is really super convenient, but let's say I wanted to find um, a particular file. So we'll just pick this will say the backup. This also works for backup or archive. And files do star.exe. See, there's another way to go find data that you might want to restore. So you can search the database all from this interface. So it's another way that we could then, click, 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 and then submit the job. Um, Lots of ways to search for your data. This is the recovery portal, depending on what jobs were submitted. And so this is a dedicated interface for administrators to be able to go in and do bulk archive, bulk restore options. And then the history of everything, you can see here that job should be finished. If there's any errors or any folders that were excluded, now has exclusions would make sense because the data already existed. So these files were excluded. If you click, we'll just say keep, and we'll open that. So it gives you the file exists, the file exists. It basically explains why nothing was actually brought back because that file already was on disk. Now, if it was deleted, then of course it would create it. So this gives you a quick overview of how to back up, archive with HTML, and archive with transparency.